And we begin with a Fox News alert on the final countdown, you might say. Less than 24 hours from now, the polls will be open, and Americans will choose the next president of the United States. Good morning to you on this Monday. I'm John Scott.
But that's not the only reason why today is a big day. Happy birthday, John Scott.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Just to start off the show. Happy birthday to John Scott.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
We're just moving into Election Day and celebrating everything we can along the way.
Yeah.
He'll take gifts. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are traveling across the country today, making their closing arguments to voters on the eve of Election Day. As brand new Fox polls show Hillary Clinton leading with 48% of the vote in a two-way race. Donald Trump 4 points behind her at 44%, as you can see.
Just hours before Election Day, some brand new polls on the race for the White House, with a Monmouth University poll hot off the presses released just moments ago, giving Hillary Clinton a 6-point lead. She's at 50% to Donald Trump's 44%. A CBS News poll also gives Clinton the edge, 45% to Trump's 41%. But an IBD TIPP poll puts Trump ahead, 43% to Clinton's 41%. It is important to note that all of these results are within the margin of error. Joining us now, Patrick Murray, director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute. What are people to make of these numbers when you get, most of the polls say Hillary Clinton has a solid lead, maybe 3, 4, 5 points, but then you get this IBD poll that puts Trump ahead.
Yeah, and there's still that USC poll that the LA Times sponsors that has, I think, Trump up by 5 points. But let's look at the polls that have a good track record. So the Fox poll, CBS, ABC, these are all polls that have very good track records, and we're looking at anywhere from a 3 or 4 or 6 to 4 to 6 margin in all those polls. They seem to have coalesced over these last few days on that range. And in presidential elections here in the U.S., that's a pretty solid number, and it suggests that all the other polls that we're seeing in state polls, like in Florida and North Carolina, she's probably doing better there. Clinton is probably doing better there.
You gave us the hat tip on the Fox News poll, so I might as well put it up there on the screen for our viewers. The Fox News national poll puts Hillary Clinton at 48%, Donald Trump at 44%. Now, this was a poll that basically gave people those two options. So pick one or the other. That still leaves, what, 8% of the population who didn't name a choice. Does that mean they are undecided, or they just flat out would not vote?
They're really not undecided. Look, the third party vote is going to come in somewhere around 5 to 7% for Johnson and Stein and McMullen and whoever else is on the ballot. It's a bigger than average year for that. So most of those people are going to end up in that. I think at this point, at this stage of the game, there is almost no voter out there who is undecided about how they're going to vote for president. They may be undecided how they're going to vote for Senate, and that's why the Senate is still up in the air. But they know who they're going to vote for. The question is, do they go out and vote? And this is why Donald Trump's in Michigan. This is why Pennsylvania's in play. These are states without early voting. So if one group comes out more than the other, that could tip the balance.
I have generally seen Donald Trump's enthusiasm numbers, that is above, enthusiasm among Trump voters, as being higher than Hillary Clinton's during this election cycle. But you say at this point that's probably not very important.
That doesn't matter at this point.
Why?
Because enthusiasm is not driving people who wouldn't have voted otherwise to the polls. It drives the early vote, not necessarily election day vote, and here's why. Is those very enthusiastic Trump voters, the people who were really excited about voting for Trump, they voted in 2012 for Romney. They voted in 2008 for McCain. They weren't enthusiastic about those votes back then, but that doesn't make them any more likely to vote. These are regular voters. They just like Donald Trump better than any other candidate they've had before. So the enthusiasm number goes up, but their likelihood to vote is exactly what it was before.
But even in the Republican Party, Donald Trump is a controversial figure. I'm surprised to hear you say that people who voted for, McCain and Romney are also excited to vote for Donald Trump.
The reason, well, they're not. They're voting against Hillary Clinton, and that's the key, is that they're voting against Hillary Clinton. In the past, these enthusiastic Trump voters would vote against whoever the Democratic nominee was, even if they didn't think that the Republican nominee was their cup of tea. So it's a little different now. but it literally does not change the number of people who are going to turn out to vote.
I know that Monmouth asked people whether they think this is going to be a fair and square election. What's the result?
Yeah, we found the vast majority think that this is going to be a fair election. It's a little bit less likely than if Clinton wins. Some Trump voters do think if Clinton wins, it could be rigged, but we're talking about less than 5%.
Well, let's hope they are right. Let's hope that it is a fair and square election all the way around. Patrick Murray, the director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute. Patrick, thank you.
My pleasure, John.
Staying with the politics now, right? Why not? Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a senior advisor for the Trump campaign. We just wanted to get to you and introduce you as quickly as possible after we saw just a portion of that big Hillary Clinton ad buy. What does your campaign have as an answer to that? Do you have a comparable ad buy that maybe we don't know about yet?
Look, we've actually been making a closing argument over the last couple of weeks. Hillary Clinton's closing argument has been nothing but personal attacks, while Donald Trump has been focused on a positive vision and what he's going to do as president. I think that the choice tomorrow could not be more clear. We've been making that since day one. It's outsider versus insider, status quo versus the corrupt status quo versus change. Donald Trump represents change. We still firmly believe this is a change election, and he's in a great position to win on Tuesday.
So what's your answer to an ad that's 2 minutes long that has 20 million people during prime time? How are you combating that as a campaign?
We've been running a similar 2-minute ad, but again, ours I think has a much greater vision for America. He talks specifically about what he's going to do to go in, turn Washington upside down, and change things that Hillary Clinton, frankly, she may say she's going to, but she's been there for 30 years. She hasn't changed anything. She's been part of the problem, and I think it's going to be really hard and frankly just completely unbelievable that she could make a case for change when she's been part of the problem for so long.
We're taking our show on the road tomorrow. One of the states we're going to be in is North Carolina. And as I've been doing some research getting ready for Election Day, one of the core group of voters in North Carolina is the white suburban professional woman, normally a mother, college educated. And there are those in the state that says this is a voting bloc that Donald Trump needs to make inroads in that look like they're voting for Hillary Clinton. You fit that description as well. I know you're a mom of 3, you're a professional woman. What is Trump's best argument for that particular voting group to vote for him?
I think it's real simple. The things that keep most of the moms, myself included, that I've talked to up at night are who's going to change America, who's going to make it safer, who's going to create jobs, who's going to make education better, who's going to make life better for my kids. I think that answer is very simple. It's Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton has, again, been part of this process. I think Donald Trump will do more for working moms and working families in the first 30 days than Hillary Clinton's done in the last 30 years.
One of the big news items over the last 24 hours is news from the FBI that there is no there with the new emails found. That was a big deal about 10 days ago with the announcement of the FBI and a lot of questions about the impact on the race. What do you think about the latest announcement for the FBI that there is no there? How does that impact your chances?
I think there still is a there because the investigation, a criminal investigation by the FBI, is still ongoing in regards to the Clinton Foundation. They're anything but clear of corruption and scandal. There's still a lot of that. There's still a lot of problems that Hillary Clinton simply can't explain. And I think that the WikiLeaks emails that have come out again over the last 24 hours further give cause for people to have a lot of concern and a lot of fear about the level of corruption that Hillary Clinton would bring to the White House.
Sarah, it's great to have you on this program, as it has been all the way, the journey that we've all been on. And we look forward to having you back again. Sarah, thank you.
A Fox News alert on the financial markets. Let's take a look at the Dow, up 311 points, back above 18,000. And the triple-digit surge coming as investors react to the news that the FBI review of Hillary Clinton's emails found no new evidence to change the Bureau's recommendation against criminal charges. The Dow now on pace to close, posting its biggest gain really in 4 months. This comes as the S&P 500 snaps its longest losing streak in nearly 40 years.
Well, breaking details in the FBI's investigation of Hillary Clinton, Director James Comey sending a letter to Congress saying they're sticking with their July decision not to recommend charges against her. John just showed us Wall Street. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Washington, D.C. Our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Harris, is live in Washington. Catherine? Well, thank you, Jenna. The FBI director sent this letter to Congress Sunday that the Clinton emails recovered from Anthony Weiner's computer in the sexting case did not change his recommendation against criminal charges for the mishandling of classified information. In July, Director Comey said Clinton and her team were extremely careless, with more than 2,100 emails with classified information and another 22 at the top secret level. But the director said there was no evidence of criminal intent to move highly sensitive materials outside secure government channels, even though Clinton used a personal unsecured server exclusively for government business. The letter reads in part, quote, "We reviewed all of the communications that were to or from Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State. Based on our review, we have not changed our conclusion that we expressed in July with respect to Secretary Clinton." While a relief to the Clinton campaign, the FBI director's letters have seemed a source of frustration.
We're glad to see that that he has found, as we were confident that he would. He has confirmed the conclusions that he really reached in July. We're glad that this matter is resolved.
The Republican chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee told Fox late yesterday that his investigations into obstruction of justice and lying under oath to Congress by Hillary Clinton will continue, though he was not surprised by the outcome.
They have come to the conclusion that they're not going to prosecute this, but Congress has a host of other questions about the potential quid pro quo. They did not answer the question yet as to whether or not Hillary Clinton has committed perjury.
The House Government Oversight Committee's ranking Democrat Elijah Cummings does not support further investigations and has asked the Justice Department internal watchdog known as the Inspector General to investigate leaks from the FBI to the Trump campaign. Jenna. Catherine, thank you. John? You're welcome.
So the FBI Director James Comey, following his October surprise with a November surprise of sorts, a letter to Congress saying the FBI is now sticking with its earlier decision not to recommend charges against Hillary Clinton for her handling of classified information. Comey is now under scrutiny for his handling of the case. Let's talk about all of the coverage it's getting. Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host. Ellen Ratner is bureau chief for Talk Media News. Both are Fox News contributors. Ellen, to you first, what do you think about the FBI director's first reinstatement of the investigation, and then a few days later, case closed?
I think he's a politician who wants to keep his job.
Really?
Yes, I do.
Well, that would presuppose that Hillary Clinton wins the election.
Well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think that, it is true that a president can fire an FBI director. However, I think that he doesn't know which way he's going to go, and I think he's hedging his bets.
All right, Tammy, your take?
Yeah, look, I think all of this became very political when Bill Clinton met with Loretta Lynch on that tarmac. And at that point in time, look, all these jobs are political appointee jobs, of course, but we're supposed to have some kind of sense of assurance that these are nonpartisan law enforcement agencies that are just going to look at the evidence. I think what people are seeing now, the first memo was kind of a bombshell because it switched things. The second memo sort of exposed some kind of chaos, or at least some kind of real politics involved in the decision making. And that speaks to some of the mood in the country right now about who can you trust? Are the law enforcement agencies fair? And especially like with the IRS targeting of the American conservatives and the Tea Party. And now it seems like an inability of at least the FBI to stick with an investigation, or even apparently conclude one, or have it be inclusive enough to be able to come to the correct decision.
So let's talk about the media coverage. Comey has been roasted by all kinds of media for the way he has handled this whole thing. Is that fair?
Well, whether he handled initially the correct way in July, or whether he handled it correctly when he wrote to Congress, or whether he now handled it correctly, I think that the media has not been good about figuring out how these decisions are made, getting sources in the FBI to talk. I mean, that's what we are supposed to be doing, after all. So I think the media has not done a great job with this.
If I may add, that's the story. The story is that certain things weren't found out in the first dynamic after that press conference in July, like the maid having access to things, or the additional devices that Huma Abedin had access to. All of that should have happened at first. If you're not doing that, then we find out that, well, they realized they didn't, so they reopen it. But then his theory of the investigation didn't change, which was he added in the intent dynamic, which is not in the original gross negligence part. So we knew that that hadn't changed, which is why everyone thought this was a big deal. And now we have this that, well, it really didn't change. So the story for the media is not who does this hurt in the campaigns. It should be what's wrong with the FBI and why is it so political?
Well, apparently they didn't find any emails that they hadn't already seen in this new treasure trove, and that's the reason.
Well, but see, this is the problem. Americans don't necessarily trust in that determination because everything has been so bungled in a way. 650,000 emails. They originally only had 50. People are wondering, how do you reassess those additional 600,000?
Well, it's a controversy that could continue even after the election.
Indeed.
Tammy Bruce, Ellen Ratner. Thank you both. Jenna.
Well, we know this is a fact, John. No matter what side you're on, it's a tight race for the White House. We're going to check out the latest scorecard and explore the possible path to victory for both candidates. Next. A Fox News alert, brand new race changes from the Fox News scorecard. Nevada moving from toss-up to leans Democrat. Iowa, Utah, and Arizona move from toss-up to leaning GOP. North Carolina moves from lean Dem to a toss-up. And the only toss-ups now, according to our scorecard, Florida, New Hampshire, and North Carolina. If that map holds true, Hillary Clinton has 274 electoral votes and enough to win the White House. Hogan Gidley is a former senior communications director, could be for president, and Capri Cafaro, Democratic Ohio State Senator and former Ohio State Senate Minority Leader. It's nice to have you guys on set. See, all we need is a presidential election to get you both here.
Two presidential campaigns in New York. You don't have to go anywhere.
Well,
They're right here.
Bringing America together.
The first time since World War II that we've seen this, so that's pretty interesting that both candidates will be here. Let's just talk about North Carolina. Again, we're taking the show down there tomorrow, but the importance of this state is big for both sides. That's why I want to talk about it. Capri, what does it look like to you for North Carolina?
Honestly, I think that, North Carolina, the big issue there is, potentially depressed African-American turnout. There have been efforts on behalf of the state legislature down there to curtail early voting and reduce some of the early voting polling locations. So I think that may have a potentially detrimental impact for Democrats there, not only the presidential race, but the United States Senate race as well. So North Carolina, I believe, is going to be the #1 state to watch tomorrow evening because I think it's going to be the most volatile. I think it's going to be the Florida of 2016.
I agree.
What about the midnight rally that Hillary Clinton is holding tonight in North Carolina? What does that tell you?
Well, she knows, and so does Donald Trump, that North Carolina really means everything. And you alluded to this in the previous segment, but North Carolina is won and lost in Wake County, which is Raleigh, and Mecklenburg, which is Charlotte. And it's largely won and lost with suburban women. Suburban women in North Carolina usually don't vote necessarily policy or politics. They vote the person. And the last several weeks for Donald Trump, with the video coming out, was very difficult. And he was derided quite a bit in North Carolina. The race with Senator Burr is very close. Pat McCrory is probably going to lose, a Republican governor as well. So 3.1 million people have already voted in North Carolina. Probably only about 5 are going to vote. So most of them have actually already voted. But the turnaround happened when Obamacare premiums are going to increase. The news broke, and it's going to be about 40% in North Carolina. Clinton pay for play was a problem, but the email investigation really started to swing those women back into Donald Trump's camp.
That's what we hear at the beginning of most of Donald Trump's speeches. His latest rallies have been the premium hike in whatever state he's in, Capri. What do you think that really means for voters as a Democrat? What do you think what is that impact for your side?
I think that it is a challenge, and I think it does depend on the state. I think that the narrative is a very strong one for Donald Trump. And I think that as he's been staying on message over the last, 10 days or so, focusing on the Obamacare premium issue, focusing on some of the things that he wants to do for the United States when it comes to the economy, for example, we are really in a situation where we've never been able to appropriately articulate the value of Obamacare, and those chickens are coming home to roost.
Going back to the rally in North Carolina, Hillary Clinton adds this to her agenda. In the meantime, you have folks, high-level journalists, national shows calling Donald Trump's strategy of visiting a lot of states like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Is that fair, Hogan? I mean, is that what Donald Trump is doing, or what is the strategy as you see it?
It's not fair. As everything starts to tighten here toward the end, let's not forget Mitt Romney went to Minnesota as well. This isn't unprecedented. Okay? The polls started to tighten, and for Republicans, Pennsylvania has largely been fool's gold because it's one of those places we think we can win. It starts to tighten, we go in there. But The reason we go after Pennsylvania and Michigan, first of all, for the working men and women there, the manufacturing jobs have left. But second of all, if we can take one of those states, it's over.
Okay,
so
quickly,
it makes sense to
I'm
try
going
to
to
go
have
in
to
there.
run. At this point, though, with the scorecard being what it is, Hillary Clinton still wins the presidency. What do you think about that, Capri? And then Hogan, I'll get your final thought.
I think we may be in for a long night, frankly. Everything is within the margin of error. Many of these swing states, many of even the states that we've put in one column or another as lean. And I think we could be headed for a long night at 269, or at least one of these states like North Carolina be contested.
I'm looking for that unheard, unwashed masses out there who haven't been polled yet, because I just did something with British television and they see a Brexit type scenario here, and if there are that many people out there who've never been involved in the political process actually coming out to vote for Trump, we wondered all during the primary with millions of people showing up to all of his rallies after several days or weeks, would they actually vote? Every time they voted, I wonder if they're going to do it in the general.
Fascinating.
We'll see.
Great to have you both here.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with more. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton dash from state to state. We do have some brand new polls that we want to show you, giving us a final snapshot of the race ahead of the election day tomorrow. A Washington Post ABC News poll has Secretary Clinton with a 4-point lead, 47 to 43%. But a Bloomberg poll gives her a narrower lead, with Clinton in front 44 to 41%. Of course, there's a margin of error as well. And a brand new Fox poll shows Secretary Clinton up by 4 points, 48 to 44%. All of them within the margin of error. And that's something that we want to talk a little bit more about. Aaron Blake is a senior politics reporter for The Washington Post, and Kristen Soltis Anderson is columnist at The Washington Examiner and a Republican pollster as well. Kristen, let me start with you. I was speaking with two nonpartisan pollsters. Sometimes pollsters lean one way or the other, but just speaking on background to two pollsters, and one thing they both said to me is they believe that Trump supporters are underrepresented in the polls. Yes, we see consistent polling around the country at this point, but what is your perspective on that possibility?
It's possible, but I think unlikely. It's what we know in social science as social desirability bias. When somebody doesn't want to participate in a study or doesn't want to confess something that is considered socially undesirable. But interestingly, this summer, Pew did a study where they asked people, who are you voting for? But then they asked, are you afraid to actually confess who you're voting for? And they found that Clinton supporters were just as likely to feel ashamed of who they were voting for, ashamed to tell anybody around them who they liked. So there's a chance this bias goes both ways. Certainly for the Trump campaign, what they're hoping is, I think, less about the fact that there are people silent and not telling pollsters that they're voting for Trump, but rather that the models pollsters are using to define who they think is or is not likely to vote are off, and that there are folks that are being considered unlikely to vote who Trump has activated in a new way.
I'm curious about that, Aaron. Let's talk a little bit about that particular person that hasn't maybe participated wholeheartedly in a lot of elections, but is out there and feels motivated to come forward and may not be included in some of the numbers that we see. What do you think?
Well, it's entirely possible. We come up with this. This question comes up almost every election. It certainly came up in 2008, the first time President Obama was on the ballot. Do people, is there a so-called Bradley effect here, where people who are going to vote for him won't say that they'll vote for him, or vice versa? In this case, I think, the idea of telling a pollster that you're going to vote for somebody is a pretty low risk proposition. You're not putting it out there with your name next to it for everyone to see. I think in this case, it's probably less of a significant factor, and there is a lot of data going back several elections that show that this impact is less than people think it will be prior to the election.
What was interesting, one pollster told me that they saw a real change with women, that if women were asked by other women if they supported Donald Trump, they would be more hesitant to come forward and say that, but they felt more comfortable with a male pollster. I mean, these are sort of interesting things that we're all talking about. We don't know how it kind of plays into the end results, but one wonders, Kristen, when we see the polls, and yes, Hillary Clinton is ahead, and she has been, but what does that margin of error tell you?
Well, margin of error is something you find in any poll. It's sort of inherent in the way that statistics work and anything that you're doing in terms of probability. So certainly, there is just noise that is baked into any poll, even one that is conducted perfectly. There's a chance that the result is off 3 points in one direction, but there's also a chance that it's off 3 points in the other direction, and that what we're maybe looking at is a Hillary Clinton landslide, even bigger than the 3 to 4 point margin. The margin of error cuts both ways. What I think is the most interesting is looking at some of these early vote numbers and seeing if they're matching up with pollsters' assumptions about certain states. states. In places like Nevada, you're seeing very high Latino turnout. That's making it so it's possible that these states may even be more for Clinton than the polls are suggesting. On the other hand, a state like North Carolina, questions about African American turnout may make that state more favorable to Trump than the polls are suggesting at this point. So it really depends on the demographic makeup.
Interesting
of the
to
state.
add in there as well, Hispanics often are underrepresented in polling, specifically in the state of Nevada. So that's interesting if we see something a little different in that state. Aaron, what state are you watching? I mean, there's a lot to watch, but is there one in particular that you think that's what I'm going to be watching tomorrow night?
Well, I think a big one, Kristen mentioned Nevada. Another state where Hispanic turnout is very strong is in Florida, which has been a swing state basically every single day of this campaign, has never really looked like it favored either candidate by too much. This is a threshold state which Donald Trump needs to win in order to have a chance at winning the presidency. From there, I think you need to look at 3 states in particular: Ohio, which is probably another must-win, and then Pennsylvania and North Carolina. I think Trump needs to win 3 of those 4 states at a minimum. If he wins all 4 of them, he's going to have a much better chance of actually winning the presidency, because we see him underperforming in a lot of these other swing states like Virginia, like Colorado. So his path to the presidency is actually pretty narrow right now. We know what it is, and I think if we watch those 4 states, we're going to get a good idea pretty early in the night whether he's on path to actually have a chance in this race.
A quick final thought from you, Kristen.
I'm from Florida, so I confess my bias. Florida's the state I'm watching as well. There you've got that Latino population that could sway this. And frankly, I think it may be lower numbers in Florida and Nevada that may be why the Trump campaign is really making a play for these Rust Belt states like Michigan that hadn't been on the map quite before this week, but now may be sort of a safety valve play for them.
It'll be interesting to watch. I mean, that's one thing for sure. Kristen, Aaron, great to have you both. Thank you very much, and fantastic perspective for us today. You know, Fox News is America's election headquarters, so stick with us tomorrow for live Election Day coverage, up-to-the-minute results, in-depth analysis as America chooses our next president. We're live all day, all night, right here on the Fox News channel.
Now, this Fox News Alert Frequent Happening Now guest, Larry Sabato, is out with his final crystal ball for the 2016 election. The University of Virginia forecasting group says it now believes Hillary Clinton will get 322 electoral votes, with Donald Trump getting 216. Crystal ball gives Florida, Nevada, North Carolina, and New Hampshire to Clinton. It gives Utah, Arizona, Iowa, and Ohio to Donald Trump. The final model has the Senate tied at 50 each, with the vice president breaking the tie. It also forecasts Democrats picking up 13 House seats and the Republicans keeping control of the lower chamber. That's the final crystal ball. We'll see how accurate they are. Meantime, the FBI director giving Hillary Clinton the all clear. Director Comey saying Clinton will not face charges over how she handled classified information. Why our next guest says the FBI's announcement is too little, too late. And we want to hear from you. Who do you think will win the presidential race? Our live chat is up and running. Go to foxnews.com/happeningnow to join the conversation. The FBI out with a November surprise, giving Hillary Clinton a last-minute reprieve. On Sunday, Director James Comey cleared her of wrongdoing after an examination of some newly discovered emails. In a letter to congressional leaders, Mr. Comey wrote, "Based on our review, we have not changed our conclusions that we expressed in July." Well, this could help Hillary Clinton come voting day tomorrow, but the damage might already be done with early voters and when it comes to the races down ballot. Let's talk about it with Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. Also with us, Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and co-host of The Five. Juan, she has gotten the all clear from James Comey. Democrats are crying foul, saying that, he never should have reopened the investigation in the first place. Others are saying, look, what he did may have energized Hillary Clinton's voters and driven them to the polls to support her. Is it a wash?
Well, I don't know about a wash. I mean, there are 2 points, and I think you hit them both, John. One is that after Comey's announcement, I guess about 11 days ago, we did see a tightening in the polls. It was not the case that you could make a direct correlation between the two. I think at the end of all races, they get a little tighter, and we saw a lot of Republicans consolidating behind Donald Trump. Paul Ryan's a good example, said, I'd vote for him even though he has not campaigned with him. And the second thing to say is that, yes, he apparently has said no charges will be filed, but Clinton's backers came out in big numbers in terms of volunteerism and financial contributions in the aftermath of the Comey announcement several days ago. So you're right, it may have energized her base. And what happened yesterday, let's just give Jim Comey, the FBI, the benefit of the doubt. And maybe he was trying to just get things done expeditiously, but nonetheless, I think damaged the FBI's reputation as above the political fray. They seem very involved in this election.
Brad, give us your assessment of what took place with the FBI, first of all in October and then now November.
Well, I think the FBI didn't have a choice early on to make their announcement to Congress. That's what they had promised to do if circumstances changed. That's what they did. It's remarkable now that an announcement came out, less than 10 days ago, stating that they've reopened this operation into looking at Hillary Clinton's emails, and 650,000 emails were in question, yet what took them over a year for 50,000 emails took them just a few days for 650,000 emails. So I agree with Juan. The politicization of the FBI is certainly an issue in this campaign, but the second announcement clearing Hillary Clinton now for the second time certainly can't hurt her, but I don't think it's going to help her. And here's why. There's a cause and effect by the time news is made until news percolates and people take in the full account of it. I think if you liked Hillary Clinton, you still like her, obviously. And if you didn't, I don't think it makes a difference. So I think that the early voting, certainly with a cloud over Hillary's head, is going to tell the tale as to whether or not that had an effect. And the polling tomorrow, I think people are going to be motivated by Hillary Clinton regardless of the email scandal. If you liked Hillary, you're going to vote for her.
Juan, for all of the outrage over the FBI and how it handled the investigation of the whole email matter, I come back time and time again to the point that if she hadn't used that homebrew server, this wouldn't be an issue at all. There would have been no FBI investigation.
So true. I don't think that's in dispute. You know, that was her mistake. She's apologized for it, but it's a mistake nonetheless. And it's why I think you still have that cloud of question. In the polls, we see it. Is she honest? Is she trustworthy? That's hurt her throughout the whole campaign.
Well, so what do Republicans do now, Brad? Do you just go to the polls hoping that that Donald Trump can, prevail despite this issue being, on the back burner at this point?
Yeah, I think now it's a matter of getting out the vote. It's the ground game, and that is at the local level. The politics of campaigning stops tomorrow, and the real heavy duty logistics of getting people motivated and to the polls begins.
One more
Hillary
day.
Clinton
Brad,
there has an advantage.
We're going to have to say goodbye. Brad Blakeman, Juan Williams.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
We're back in a moment.
You've heard it here. There's been a lot of talk this election season about the unpopularity of both candidates. And many voters talk about writing in someone who was eliminated in the primaries or who never ran in the first place. Some even saying that they want to write in the celebrity name or maybe even their own name. But that kind of writing candidate could actually invalidate your vote for president. So what exactly are the rules? And what happens if someone on the ballot has died? This actually happened. Warren Judge was running for a North Carolina legislative seat when he unexpectedly passed away. Now, if he were to win after tomorrow's vote, the local Democratic Party will determine who fills that seat. I mean, it's fascinating to think about all the different scenarios. Jerry Goldfeder is an election law professor at Fordham University, author of Modern Election Law. So he's the person to talk to. We know if we're going to break the law if we talk to you, Jerry. So this case in North Carolina, someone passes away in the process. They can't take their name off the ballot.
That's right. It's too late.
So in North Carolina, you could legally vote for someone who is dead.
That's right.
And what would happen?
That dead person can win. And if the dead person wins, that means if it's a Democrat, then the Democratic Party leaders, if it's a Republican, the Republican Party leaders, they pick a substitute.
Okay, is there any other scenarios that's very similar to that where someone could be on the ballot? I mean, we'd hope that they didn't pass away, but something happens where they're not going to be able to assume the seat. Is it always the party that then decides?
Well, it depends on the state. We have a very wacky system here in the United States. We vote for president in a very bizarre way. We don't even vote for the candidate. We vote for electors pledged to Hillary Clinton or pledged to Donald Trump. And those electors actually choose the president in middle of December. That's our real election day. And every state has its own election laws.
Admittedly, I forget about that. That's why we talk about electoral votes.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So the reason why I wanted to talk to you today is I saw an article in the Houston Chronicle just last week of someone who wanted to vote for Willie Nelson. And there was a discussion on social media that Willie Nelson is a national treasure, but he is not running for president. And therefore, if you were to vote for Willie Nelson, your vote wouldn't count. Tell us about that, because I think some folks may want to write in a candidate. What do they need to know?
Well, first of all, every state is different. Every state is different with regard to voter registration rules, ID rules, whether you can even write in. There are some states that prohibit you from writing in anybody, and the Supreme Court of the United States has said that's fine. And there are some states where if you write in somebody's name for president, it only counts if that person has registered as a candidate for president of the United States. So Governor Kasich in Ohio, he didn't vote for Trump. He said he voted for John McCain. But John McCain is running for re-election for the United States Senate in Arizona. He didn't register as a candidate for president of the United States in Ohio. So Governor Kasich wasted his vote.
Interesting.
He wrote it in, and it meant absolutely nothing. And as I say, in some states, you can't even write in a candidate's name.
How many people are running for president right now?
Well, there are about 1,700 and change candidates who have registered with the Federal Election Commission. But that doesn't mean they're all on the ballot in your state, because every state has different rules about how to get on the ballot, how to run for president. So you can go into the ballot tomorrow, you can go into the voting booth tomorrow, and you'll see some people's names who you've never heard of. But we won't have 1,700 people running for president all over the United States.
And again, going back to each state, so each state has different parameters for how that person actually gets their name on the ballot in that state.
Usually you have to submit a certain number of petition signatures or a filing fee, or if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're automatically on the ballot.
You know, those that vote want their vote to count, one would think. And there's certainly been this conversation. Eric Shawn has done some great reporting here on the network about the selfies that people are taking in voting booths and how you're not supposed to do that. Is there anything else that you think people should know about what not to do to ensure their vote counts?
You have to make sure that when you go in, you follow the instructions. If it says fill in this box, fill in the box. If it says make a check, make a check. If it's pulling a lever, do it right. Look at the instructions and make sure before you submit the ballot that it says exactly what you want it to say.
Because there's no going back.
There's no going back. Well,
go
there are
rogue.
some states that you could say, oh, I made a mistake, I need a new ballot. And you can do that.
But in other states?
In other states, you cannot.
It.
That's right. That's right. And if you remember, 16 years ago, in 2000, people thought they were voting for Al Gore, and they were voting for Buchanan instead, because the way the ballot was set up was such a cockamamie ballot.
I see what you're saying. So take your time.
So take your time.
Relax.
See who you're going to vote for. Make sure you follow the instructions. Look at it. And then submit
Okay, good
it.
advice. Don't drink too much coffee or anything else before you go in. Very interesting. It's great to take a look at the laws. Thank you very much, Professor. Great to have you on the program.
I think it's real simple. The things that keep most of the moms, myself included, that I've talked to up at night are who's going to change America, who's going to make it safer, who's going to create jobs, who's going to make education better, who's going to make life better for my kids. I think that answer is very simple. It's Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton has, again, been part of this process. I think Donald Trump will do more for working moms and working families in the first 30 days than Hillary Clinton's done in the last 30 years.
Well, that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. When I asked her earlier on Happening Now about Donald Trump's effort to overcome his weakness in the polls with women voters, a specific segment of those voters. At Fox, we like to keep it fair and balanced, and now we're going to hear from the other side. Lanny Davis is a former White House special counsel, founder of Trident DMG, who also supports Hillary Clinton. Lanny, it's nice to see you midday here on the Fox News
Thanks
channel.
for having me.
So I was asking Sarah about this key voter, specifically in the state of North Carolina, but we can extrapolate that out to other battleground states. It's the professional woman, white woman, living in the suburbs, educated, who has seemed to poll more in favor of Hillary Clinton. That was the Trump team's response, saying that they think they have made some inroads with that voter. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the data is showing that women are favoring Hillary Clinton, not just because she's a woman. In fact, that seems to be less important than that she is more qualified to be president. and that she's more trustworthy with her finger on the nuclear button. Donald Trump, and I don't want to be partisan today, I certainly respect somebody who says they prefer Donald Trump, is simply no record of public service and no record of working with others who differ with him. And so Hillary Clinton's record with friends in the U.S. Senate who are Republican, I think will be a more bipartisan president once the dust settles and we get over all the nastiness of this
why do you
campaign.
think people should believe that? Because that's what Hillary Clinton wrote about today in an article in USA Today. This has been such a divisive campaign season with attacks from both sides. Why should voters believe she will be able to govern and reach across the aisle?
So I never ask people, as much as I believe in myself, to believe me. I always say, just look at the facts and make your own decision based on facts that you can verify, not facts that you read on the internet. So here's a fact you can verify. When she was a U.S. Senator, conservative Republican Lindsey Graham of South Carolina sang her praises for bipartisan work on the Armed Services Committee, where the both of them produced legislation to provide health care for people in the armed services. Senator John McCain, a conservative senator from Arizona, described Hillary Clinton as the favorite Democratic senator of Republican senators. Why? Because you could work with her, because she was fact and solution focused. So that's her record. That's a record that she can point to that's factual. It's not asking anyone to believe her promises. That's the difference with Donald Trump, with no record. Indeed, if I were partisan, I would say a record that's been pretty nasty in the words he uses about women. Even when he was on tape and he says he didn't mean it, they were still words that were pretty nasty. He has a problem, absent the experience, to persuade people that he actually can work with Democrats.
Okay, let me talk to you a little bit. I know you don't want to be partisan, so let me just talk a little bit about Democrat strategy. I don't need you to talk about the other side. Let me just talk a little bit about Democrat strategy. We had Capri Cafaro on our show during the first hour of Happening Now, and she was expressing some concern. She's a Democrat about the turnout of African-American voters, specifically in North Carolina. I want to go ahead and play that sound.
North Carolina, the big issue there is, potentially depressed African-American turnout. There have been efforts on behalf of the state legislature down there to curtail early voting and reduce some of the early voting polling locations. So I think that may have a potentially detrimental impact for Democrats there, not only the presidential race, but the United States Senate race as well. So North Carolina, I believe, is going to be the #1 state to watch tomorrow evening, because I think it's going to be the most volatile. I think it's going to be the Florida of 2016.
You talk to some Democrats, Lanny, and they say, oh, no, that's okay. Voter turnout is just fine. But then you do have Hillary Clinton doing a midnight rally in Raleigh, in North Carolina. So one wonders, what is the reality? What's the real situation when it comes to that particular voting bloc?
Well, there's no doubt a Court of Appeals in federal court has said that the Republican legislature in North Carolina targeted in a very specific laser beam way African-American precincts, changing locations and trying to suppress the vote. And I think that's the concern. But the numbers actually don't reflect that. The pre-voting numbers now, despite all the difficulties and impediments deliberately put in place to make it more difficult, they're just about at the percentage level of the first African-American president, Barack Obama. So she's doing okay and will do much better because of our ground game.
So you don't think it has anything to do with her as a candidate? You think it's just the Republicans that have prevented the voting bloc from turning out?
No, it's not entirely the Republicans. That's just a fact the Court of Appeals pointed out. She's a white woman, and the first African-American president is probably going to get a bigger turnout among African-Americans. That's just a simple fact. But given that fact, Barack Obama is campaigning for her. He's revving up members of the African-American community, the Latino community, and lots of other supporters. Barack Obama has an approval rating that is the highest for a second-term president.
It was interesting.
So he's helping.
Just perspective for our viewers, the reason why we're asking this question is still in the state of North Carolina, Barack Obama won by just under a percentage point. And Mitt Romney, still with good voter turnout, won just by 2 percentage points in North Carolina. So it is the definition of a swing state, and that is why the voting bloc is something that we're looking at so particularly today. Lanny, great to have your perspective, as always, and we look forward to having you back. Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you.
A flurry of legal activity ahead of Election Day in some closely watched states. Let's start in Ohio, where Democrats in that battleground state want the Supreme Court to intervene for them in their voter intimidation lawsuit involving the Trump campaign. It comes as the highest court in the land did rule on a case in Arizona. That's a red state that Democrats hope to turn blue this election. The Supreme Court just reinstated a law there that makes it a felony for a third party to collect early ballots. And in the battleground state of North Carolina, a federal judge just ordered 3 counties to restore thousands of voter registrations canceled too close to Election Day. Joining us now, Jonas Bilbour, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Also with us, Heather Hansen, a trial attorney. You both got the black memo today.
Yeah, we did.
I guess we're not going red or blue. We're going to just keep it simple.
That's exactly right.
This North Carolina one, first of all, surprises me because what the state apparently was trying to do is purge the rolls of people who, may have moved or may be dead. And the judge said, you got to put them back on the rolls, even if they're dead, right?
They do not like to mess with the rules of the game when it's this close to the end of the game. So it's something called the Purcell Principle, and it says that the courts don't want to step in. They may step in after the election, but this close to the election, they really want to maintain the status quo. I think that's what you've seen in all 3 of those rulings, and I think that's what you'll see when the Supreme Court acts in Ohio. Everything will stay the same.
But dead people voting? Does the court really want to sanction that?
No, exactly. In this case, the status quo